The galaxy was full of light. Every planet, every space station, every ship that traveled between the stars burned bright like small suns. There was never darkness. There could never be darkness. All the species of the Galactic Concordat agreed on this one truth above everything else. Darkness meant death. Ambassador Ani of the people stood on her ship and watched the strange vessel appear from nowhere. Her body was made of living crystal, and light moved through her like blood moves through humans. She had served the Concordat for 300 years. She had seen many things, but she had never seen a ship like this one. It was small and gray and looked fragile. Parts of it were not even lit properly. She could see dark windows, dark hallways. Her crystal body flickered with fear at the sight. "What species is this?" she asked her assistant. "Unknown, Ambassador. They call themselves humans. They come from a planet called Earth." Ani made the decision quickly. New species needed to learn the rules. They needed to understand the danger. The Umbral were always watching, always waiting in the dark places. One mistake could kill them all. She took a small team and boarded the human ship. The airlock opened, and she stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was the smell. It was strange but not unpleasant. The second thing she noticed made her stop completely. The hallway in front of her was dark. Not dim, not shadowed, actually dark. She could see a few small lights on the walls, but they were weak and far apart. Any creature from the Concordat would have run screaming from such a place. The Umbral could be anywhere in that darkness. They could be right there, waiting to feed on minds and souls. But there were humans walking through it. Ani watched them with growing horror. They moved through the darkness like it was nothing. Some of them were even talking and laughing. A female human walked past a completely unlit section and did not even look at it. "Ambassador, are you okay?" The voice came from in front of her. A human female stood there, wearing a simple uniform. She had brown skin and dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold no fear at all. "I am Captain," the human said. "Welcome to the Prometheus. We are honored to meet other intelligent life." Ani could not speak for a moment. Her mind was trying to understand what she was seeing. Finally, she pointed at the dark sections of the hallway. "Your lights," she said. "They are broken. You must fix them immediately. Do you not understand the danger?" Captain looked at the darkness, then back at Ani. She seemed confused. "Danger? Those sections are just powered down to save energy. We keep the lights off when nobody needs them." "Off?" Ani's voice was high with panic. "You turn your lights off by choice." "Of course. We turn them off every night to sleep. Most humans cannot sleep with lights on." Ani felt like the universe had stopped making sense. She had studied many species. She had learned many languages, but she had never heard of any creature that chose to be in darkness. The very idea was insane. "Captain," she said slowly, "do your people not know about the Umbral?" "I don't know that word. What are Umbral?" So Ani told her. She told her about the things that lived in the darkness between stars. She told her about the formless shadows that fed on the minds of thinking creatures. She told her about the billions who had died screaming in the dark, their thoughts eaten, their souls destroyed. She told her about the one absolute law of the galaxy: nothing shall live in darkness. Captain listened carefully. Her face was serious, but Ani saw something strange in her eyes. It was not the terror she expected. It was something else, something like recognition. "So there really are monsters in the dark," the captain said quietly. "We always told stories about them. I guess we were right." "Stories?" Ani could not understand. "You knew about the Umbral." "Not exactly, but humans have always known something was wrong with the dark. We felt it. We feared it. Children see shadows and cry for their parents. Adults wake up from nightmares and cannot go back to sleep. We have always known we were not alone in the dark." "Then why do you not keep your lights on? Why do you walk through darkness like it is safe?" Captain was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but strong. Because we had no choice, Ambassador. Our planet rotates. Every day the sun goes down and half our world is covered in darkness. We could not stop it. We could not run from it. So we learned to live with it. She gestured at the dark hallway beside them. For 200,000 years, my ancestors slept in the dark. They told stories around small fires while shadows pressed close. They heard sounds in the night and had to decide whether to run or fight. Sometimes there were real predators out there. Sometimes there was nothing, but they had to face that fear every single night of their lives. Ani's crystal body was pulsing with confused light. She had never heard of such a thing. Every species in the Concordat had evolved in constant light. They came from a world of endless day. They lived in glowing oceans. They had lights built into their bodies. No species had ever had to face the dark without protection. Until now. Your species, she whispered, you do not fear the dark. Captain smiled. It was a strange smile, full of old knowledge and hard experience. Oh, we fear it, she said. We have feared it since before we had words. But fear and surrender are not the same thing, Ambassador. We learned to fear the dark and walk into it anyway. We learned to feel terror and still do what needed to be done. She took a step toward the unlit hallway. The darkness wrapped around her like a cloak. Fear it, she said. Ambassador, we were born in it. Ani watched the human captain stand in the darkness, completely calm, completely unbroken. And for the first time in her 300 years of life, the ambassador felt something she had never felt before. Hope. If this small, soft species could face the darkness and survive, then maybe everything the Concordat knew about the universe was wrong. Maybe the eternal light was not the only way. Maybe the umbral could be fought. Maybe the endless fear could finally end. She did not know it yet, but she was looking at the beginning of the end of all wars. She was looking at a human. And humans had been fighting the darkness for longer than most species had existed. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. A new species had been found. They were called humans, and they did not fear the dark. At first, nobody believed it. The idea was too strange, too impossible. Every thinking creature feared the darkness. It was natural. It was built into the mind itself. The umbral had made sure of that over millions of years. But the reports kept coming. Videos showed humans walking through unlit hallways. Scientists documented human children sleeping in completely dark rooms. Some humans even went outside at night on their planet when half the world was covered in shadow, and they did this for fun. The Concordat did not know what to do with this information. Some species wanted to study the humans. Others wanted to stay far away from them. A few whispered that the humans must be working with the umbral somehow. No normal creature could face the dark without going mad. The High Council called a meeting to decide what to do. Doctor was one of the first human scientists to visit the Concordat home station. She was which meant she studied how different species thought and felt. She was small and thin, with gray hair and gentle eyes. She did not look dangerous, but her mind held ideas that would change everything. The council chamber was the room she had ever seen. Light came from every direction. There were no shadows anywhere. The alien leaders sat in a circle, their bodies glowing and sparkling and shining. Doctor, said High Counselor of the, we have read your reports. You claim to understand why humans do not fear darkness. Please explain. Stood in the center of the room. She was not afraid. She had faced worse things than alien politicians. Honored Council, she said, I want to start by saying that humans do fear the dark. This is important to understand. We are afraid of it. Our children cry when the lights go out. Our adults feel nervous in dark places. The fear is real. The council members looked confused. If humans feared the dark, why did they not act like everyone else? The difference, continued, is what we do with that fear. You see, human beings evolved on a planet that rotates. Every 24 hours our sun goes away and we are left in darkness. For half of every day we could not escape the night. She brought up images of Earth on the display screen. The council watched as the planet turned, and light gave way to shadow over and over again. For 200,000 years my ancestors had to sleep in the dark. They had to hunt in the dark. They had to protect their families in the dark. They could not build enough fires to light the whole world. They could not stay awake forever, so they had to adapt. Adapt how? Asked Ambassador Ani, who was also present. Their minds learn to process fear differently. When a human feels terror, our brains do not shut down. We can still think. We can still act. This is because if our ancestors froze every time they felt afraid in the dark, they would have died. Only the ones who could push through the fear survived to have children. The council was very quiet now. They were beginning to understand. But there is more, said. Humans develop something that no other species seems to have. We call them nightmares. She explained how humans dreamed when they slept, and sometimes those dreams became terrible visions of horror and death. Monsters chased them. Loved ones died. The world ended in fire and shadow. Every human has nightmares, said. From childhood until death, we practice being afraid. We practice facing impossible terrors in our sleep, and then we wake up. We learn that the fear was not real. We learn that we can survive it. High Counselor leaned forward. His insect body clicked with intense interest. You are saying that humans train to face fear every night? Yes. Without knowing it, every human being spends thousands of hours learning to feel terror and come out the other side. We wake up from nightmares with our hearts beating fast and our bodies shaking. And then we calm down. We tell ourselves it was just a dream. We go back to sleep. Pause to let this sink in. The Umbral attack minds with fear. They create visions of the worst things a creature can imagine. But humans have been having those visions every night for our entire existence. We have already seen the worst things we can imagine. We have already felt that terror thousands of times. Ambassador Ani's crystal body was pulsing with amazement. The nightmares, she whispered, they were preparing you all this time. Nodded. The Umbral use fear as a weapon, but to humans fear is just another feeling. It is not pleasant. We do not like it, but we know it will not kill us. We know we will wake up. The council chamber erupted in noise. Every species was talking at once. Some were excited. Some were scared. Some did not want to believe what they were hearing. High Counselor raised a limb for silence. Doctor, he said slowly, are you telling us that humans can resist the Umbral? Thought carefully before answering. I am saying that the Umbral's main weapon may not work on us the way it works on everyone else. When they try to break our minds with terror, they are using a tool that we have been fighting against since before we could speak. We are not immune, but we are experienced. The council talked for many hours after that. They argued and debated and worried, but by the end they had made a decision. For 10,000 years, the Concordat had only defended against the Umbral. They had built their lights and hidden from the darkness and tried to survive. They had never even considered fighting back. But now there was a species that could walk in the dark, a species that had been training for this war since the beginning of their existence, a species that faced their fears every single night and woke up still fighting. The council voted to create a new military force. They would ask for human volunteers to do something that no creature had ever done before. They would attack the darkness itself. And humanity, without knowing it, had been preparing for this moment for 200,000 years. The children of the night were going to war. Sergeant Cole stood at the airlock door and looked into pure darkness. He was 34 years old. He had been born in a small town on Earth where the nights were very dark and the stars were very bright. As a child, he had been afraid of the monster under his bed. As a teenager, he had walked through dark forests to prove he was brave. As a soldier, He had fought in battles where the lights went out and men screamed in the black. Now he was about to do something no creature had ever done before. He was going to walk into umbral territory with no light at all. "Are you sure about this?" Captain asked through the radio. She was watching from the command ship, far away in safe, bright space. Checked his equipment one more time. He had no weapon. There was no weapon that could hurt the umbral. He had no light. Light would defeat the purpose of this mission. He had only a neural recorder attached to his head and his own human mind. "I'm sure," he said. "Someone has to be first. If it gets too bad, we'll pull you out." Smiled even though she could not see it. "Captain, we both know that's not true. If the umbral take me, I'll be dead before you can do anything. But that's okay. This is important." He stepped through the airlock. The darkness was complete. There was no light from stars here, no light from distant galaxies. This was the void between places where the umbral lived and fed and waited, could not see his hand in front of his face. For a moment, nothing happened. He floated in the black emptiness and listened to his own breathing. Then they came. He did not see them. Nobody ever saw the umbral, but he felt them. It was like cold water running down his spine. It was like a voice whispering terrible things just below the level of hearing. It was like knowing with absolute certainty that something was watching him. The first attack came fast. Suddenly was not in space anymore. He was in his childhood bedroom. The lights were off. His blanket was pulled up to his chin, and the closet door was opening. He could hear the creak of the hinges. He could see the darkness inside the closet getting darker, deeper, like a hole that went down forever. Something was in there. Something was coming out. Felt his heart begin to race. His body wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at him to get away, to find light, to escape the thing in the closet. But he had felt this before, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. "This is not real," he said out loud. His voice shook, but the words were clear. "I am not a child. I am not in my bedroom. This is a memory. This is fear, and fear cannot kill me." The closet door stopped moving. The umbral seemed confused. Their attack had always worked before. Every creature they had ever touched had broken under this kind of terror. But this human was still thinking, still speaking, still fighting. They tried again. Now was drowning. Water filled his lungs. He could not breathe. He was sinking into a black ocean with no bottom, and something huge was rising from below, something with too many teeth and eyes that glowed with hunger. The panic was overwhelming. His body thrashed. His mind screamed. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice spoke calmly. "This is not real. I am not drowning. I am floating in space. My lungs are fine. This is just a nightmare, and I have woken up from nightmares before." He focused on his breathing, slow and steady, in and out, the way his mother had taught him when he had bad dreams as a boy. The water disappeared. The monster faded, was back in the darkness of space. The umbral attacked again and again. They showed him his worst fears. They showed him his friends dying. They showed him his own death over and over in 100 horrible ways. They showed him things that no human should ever see. And felt all of it. He was not immune. He was terrified. His body shook. Tears floated away from his eyes in the zero gravity. Several times he almost broke. But he did not break. Every time the fear became too much, he remembered something. A song his grandmother used to sing. The smell of his mother's cooking. The sound of rain on the roof of his childhood home. Small, real things that reminded him who he was. The umbral could create fear, but they could not take away his memories of love. After 3 hours, something incredible happened. The umbral pulled back. Felt them retreat. The cold presence faded. The whispers stopped. For the first time, he was alone in the darkness. And then he felt something else, something new. It was pain, not his pain, their pain. The umbral were hurting. did not understand how or why, but somehow his resistance had wounded them. His refusal to break had caused them damage. Every time he pushed through the fear, every time he reminded himself that it was not real, he had struck back at them. He had not just survived, he had fought. 3 hours and 17 minutes after entering umbral space, Sergeant Cole was pulled back to the command ship. He was exhausted. He was shaking. He had aged 10 years in one night. But he was alive, and he was smiling. "I hurt them," he said to Captain as the medical team rushed around him. "When I didn't break, it hurt them. They felt it. They actually felt it." Captain looked at the neural recordings. She saw everything had experienced. She saw the attacks, the terrors, the moments when he almost gave in, and she saw the moments when he pushed back. "This changes everything," she whispered. She was right. Within weeks, the news spread across the Concordat. A human had walked into the darkness and survived. More than survived. He had made the umbral retreat. Volunteers began to sign up by the thousands. They called themselves the Nightwalkers. They trained in dark rooms and sensory deprivation chambers. They learned the techniques that had used. They prepared to face their fears. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had run from the darkness. Now, for the first time, the darkness was going to learn what it meant to be afraid. The war had begun, and humanity was leading the charge. The war against the umbral lasted 12 years. In that time, humanity changed. The species that had once been small and unknown became the most important force in the galaxy. Millions of humans volunteered to become Nightwalkers. They trained in complete darkness. They learned to control their fear. They marched into the void and fought battles that no other species could even watch. The other races of the Concordat supported them however they could. They built special ships that could travel without light. They created healing tanks for wounded Nightwalkers. They developed communication systems that worked in total darkness. For the first time in galactic history, every species worked together toward one goal, not because they liked each other, not because they shared the same values, but because they finally had hope. Was born in the 5th year of the war. Her mother was a Nightwalker who had survived 30 missions into umbral space. Her father was an engineer who built the dark ships. From the day she was born, was surrounded by people who faced their fears every day. She grew up hearing stories about the umbral. Other children in the galaxy were told to fear the darkness, was told that darkness was just another place where brave people could go. She was not raised to run from fear. She was raised to understand it. By the time she was 15, she was already training to become a Nightwalker. By 18, she had completed her first mission. By 20, she was one of the best soldiers humanity had ever produced. But was different from the other Nightwalkers in one important way. She did not just resist the umbral. She was curious about them. Why do they need fear? She asked her teachers. What are they really? Where did they come from? Nobody knew the answers. The umbral had existed for as long as anyone could remember. They were just part of the universe, like stars and planets and empty space. But kept thinking about it. During her missions, while the umbral attacked her mind, she paid attention. She noticed patterns. She learned. The Battle of the Cygnus Void happened in the 12th year of the war. It was supposed to be a simple mission. A fleet of Nightwalkers would push into umbral territory and clear a path for a new trade route. Nobody expected heavy resistance. They were wrong. The umbral came in numbers that no one had ever seen before. Thousands of them, maybe millions. The darkness was so thick with their presence that even veteran Nightwalkers began to break. Was on the lead ship when the attack began. She felt them hit her mind like a tidal wave. Every fear she had ever known came rushing back. Her mother dying, her father sick, her friends screaming in the dark, the whole universe ending in cold, empty silence. For a moment she almost gave in. The fear was too strong. There were too many of them. But then something strange happened. in the middle of all that terror, had a thought. It was a simple thought, but it changed everything. "They're scared too." She did not know where the idea came from, but suddenly she understood. The Umbral attacked so hard because they were desperate. They fed on fear because they needed it to survive. They hid in the darkness because they were afraid of creatures that could face them. The Umbral were not monsters. They were predators who had finally met something they could not hunt. And they were terrified. In that moment, stopped fighting. She stopped resisting. She stopped being afraid. She simply accepted the darkness. It was not good or bad. It was not safe or dangerous. It was just darkness, an absence of light, a natural part of the universe. The Umbral were creatures that lived in that darkness, just like fish lived in water or birds lived in air. There was nothing to fear. There had never been anything to fear. Fear itself was just a feeling, a signal from the brain, a tool that evolution had given humans to help them survive. But did not need to survive anymore. She needed to understand. The Umbral felt the change in her mind. They had never encountered anything like it before. Every creature they had ever touched held some fear deep inside. Even the bravest Nightwalkers carried terror in their hearts. But this human had none, not because she was blocking it or fighting it. She had simply let it go. Opened her eyes in the darkness, and for the first time in history, a human truly saw the Umbral. They were beautiful. Strange shapes made of shadow and ancient memory. Creatures born in the first moments of the universe when all was dark and formless. They had never been evil. They had just been hungry. And their food was the fear that thinking creatures carried. "I see you," whispered. "I understand you, and I am not afraid." The Umbral screamed. It was not a sound. It was a feeling that passed through every mind in the fleet. The Nightwalkers felt it. The aliens far away felt it. Even the Umbral themselves felt it. Awakening spread through the neural link that connected all the Nightwalkers. Her understanding, her acceptance, her freedom from fear passed from mind to mind like light spreading through a dark room. And then it went further. The neural links connected to communication systems. The communication systems connected to networks across the galaxy. Within hours, every human everywhere felt what it felt. They understood. Darkness was not the enemy. Fear was not the enemy. These were just parts of existence, no different from light or joy or sadness. They did not need to be conquered. They just needed to be accepted. Humanity woke up. Not from sleep, from the fear that had followed them since their ancestors first looked at the night sky and wondered what was watching them. 200,000 years of terror ended in a single moment. And the Umbral felt it. Every one of them across the entire galaxy felt the sudden silence where human fear had been. The food source they had fed on for so long was gone, not just reduced, gone. They fled. They ran from human space. They ran from Concordat space. They ran from everywhere that thinking creatures lived. They retreated to the deepest voids between galaxies where no mind could reach them. The war was over. Not because one side had won, but because humanity had stopped playing the game entirely. Floated in the darkness of the Cygnus void, surrounded by her fellow Nightwalkers, they were all crying. They were all laughing. They had all felt the same awakening, the same freedom. For the first time in history, the darkness was empty. And a young woman who had grown up without fear had taught an entire galaxy what it meant to truly be brave. The galaxy was quiet in a way it had never been before. For 10,000 years, every species had lived in fear. They had built their civilizations around avoiding the darkness. They had fought wars over light-rich territories. They had spent their resources on illumination systems and bright defenses. Now the Umbral were gone, and nobody knew what to do. Ambassador Ani stood on the observation deck of the new Concordat flagship. She had lived for over 300 years. She had watched her people struggle and suffer and survive. And now, for the first time in her long life, she was looking at darkness without fear. The deck lights were dimmed, not turned off completely, but dimmed. A year ago, this would have been impossible. They would never allow shadows in their space, but things had changed. Everything had changed. It still feels strange, she said to the human standing beside her, to see darkness and feel nothing but curiosity. Admiral smiled. She had gray in her hair now. 20 years had passed since the first contact between humans and the Concordat. She had been there at the beginning. She had watched everything unfold. It takes time, said. Humans have been living with darkness for thousands of generations. We had a head start. But you shared it with us. Ani's crystal body glowed softly with emotion. When awakened, when that understanding spread, it did not stop with humans. We all felt it. My people, everyone. Nodded. The neural links carried more than we expected. When humanity let go of fear, the feeling was contagious. Other species caught it like a good kind of sickness. Is that why the war stopped? This was the question everyone had been asking for the past 8 years. Since the Umbral fled, not a single war had started anywhere in the galaxy. Old conflicts that had burned for centuries suddenly went cold. Species that had hated each other for generations began to talk. Nobody fully understood why, but had her theories. Fear was at the root of everything, she said slowly. We fought over resources because we were afraid of not having enough. We attacked strangers because we were afraid they would attack us first. We built walls and weapons and empires because we were afraid of being weak. She looked out at the stars. There were billions of them, scattered across the black void like diamonds on dark cloth. When showed us how to let go of fear, something broke in all of us. The old pattern stopped making sense. Why fight when you are not afraid of losing? Why hate when you are not afraid of being different? Ani considered this. It matched her own experience. Since the awakening, her people had become calmer, more open. They still had disagreements, still had problems, but they solved them with words now instead of weapons. The humans call it the long peace, Ani said. Is that what you believe, that it will last? Was quiet for a long moment. I believe it will last as long as we remember what we learned, she finally said. Fear is not gone forever. It is part of being alive. There will always be things that scare us. What matters is what we do with that fear. A door opened behind them, walked onto the observation deck. She was 30 years old now. The young woman who had ended the war had grown into a calm, thoughtful leader. She was not a soldier anymore. She was a teacher. She traveled from world to world, helping other species understand the awakening she had experienced. Admiral, Ambassador, she nodded to both of them with respect. The expedition fleet is ready. Ani felt excitement run through her crystal form. Today was a historic day. For the first time ever, a joint fleet of all Concordat species was going to leave the galaxy. They were going to explore the intergalactic void, the space between galaxies where no one had ever traveled. The darkness had kept them trapped for 10,000 years. Now they were finally free to explore it. Are you nervous? Asked. Smiled. It was the same smile that had faced the Umbral in the Cygnus void, full of curiosity instead of fear. A little, she admitted. But that is okay. Being nervous means I care about what happens. It means I am alive and awake and paying attention. That is not something to run from. Laughed softly. Your mother used to say the same thing. Before every mission, she would tell me she was nervous, and then she would go do impossible things anyway. She taught me well. The three of them stood together and watched the expedition fleet power up. There were ships from every species in the Concordat, crystal vessels, water ships, hive carriers, and at the center of them all, a fleet of human dark ships designed to travel without any light at all. I have been thinking, Ani said quietly, about everything that has happened, about the Umbral and the war and the awakening. and I realized something that I want to say to you both." And turned to look at her. "For most of my life, I believed that humans were lucky," Ani continued. "I thought it was an accident of evolution that made you able to face the darkness. I thought the universe had simply been kind to your species." She paused, her crystal body glowing brighter. "But I was wrong. It was not luck. It was pain. Your ancestors suffered in the dark for 200,000 years. They were scared every night of their lives. They watched their children cry with fear. They woke up from nightmares again and again. That suffering shaped you into what you are." Her voice grew soft with emotion. "You did not defeat the Umbral because you were gifted. You defeated them because you had already been through the fire. Your whole species was forged in the darkness. And when the time came, you used that pain to save everyone." Reached out and touched Ani's crystalline hand. "We saved each other," she said gently. "Humans could not have one alone. We needed your ships and your technology and your support. We needed this healing and this communication systems. The awakening was shared because we are all connected." Nodded in agreement. "That is the real lesson," she added. "Not that humans are special, but that every species has something to offer. Every type of creature evolved with different strengths and weaknesses. When we work together, we cover each other's gaps." The expedition fleet began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, heading toward the edge of the galaxy. Heading toward the great unknown darkness between the stars. Ani watched them go with wonder in her heart. "What do you think is out there?" she asked. Smiled. "I do not know, maybe nothing. Maybe wonders we cannot imagine, maybe dangers we have never faced," she shrugged. "But whatever it is, we will face it together, and we will not be afraid." The fleet disappeared into the darkness. The three leaders stood in silence, watching the last lights fade into the void. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had lived in fear of the dark. Now they were exploring it. For 10,000 years, species had fought each other for scraps of light. Now they were united. For 10,000 years, the Umbral had hunted thinking creatures across the stars. Now they were hiding in the deepest voids, afraid of the species that had learned to face their fears. The old universe was gone, a new one was being born. And at the heart of it all were the humans, the small, soft creatures from a rotating planet, the children of a world that went dark every night, the species that had learned to be afraid and brave at the same time. They had not conquered the galaxy, they had healed it. And as the lights dimmed across 1,000 worlds, as species learned to sleep in darkness for the first time, the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter. Not because there was more light, but because there was finally no fear of the shadow. The wars were over, all of them forever. And in the darkness between the stars, where monsters had once waited, there was only peace. Silent, beautiful, endless peace. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons, not technology, not power. Just the simple truth that darkness was nothing to fear. And that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going anyway. The end.